Well, they say partnerships are akin to marriage in a way. Sometimes they work out well, sometimes they don't. I'm Neil Gordon from Augusta Business Daily with my friend and business coach, Darin Myers. And I'm in a partnership, and we're learning as we go. It's been a year or so. It takes time, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and it's, I think our title, Nightmare or Dream, is appropriate. I just think that a lot of people get enamored with all the positives of what a partnership brings, and they do. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of horror stories out there of where partnerships have not weathered the storm, and people end up going in different directions, and unfortunately, in some cases, costly litigation, loss of friendships and relationships, and honestly, in some cases, we're even talking family businesses. It doesn't necessarily have to be outside of the family. It can be within the family, and what a mess. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Darin is the facilitator of the Alternative Board TAB. I'm a part of it, and within the group, there are members that have partnerships.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to talk about this today, because I think it is so important. Obviously, there's a certain number of partnerships out there from a business standpoint, and if they go well, the 1 + 1 = 3, right? And the just leverage and strength and force multiplication with diverse partners and what they can bring to the table together, I think so powerful. But at the end of the day, there is so much that is fraught with danger if you haven't talked that through. And so you mentioned one or two of our board members have a partnership, a couple of which have, had previous history where they were involved with a successful business, and then unfortunately, the dynamics of the partnership really cost a very successful business, and it broke apart largely. So I wanted to talk about it today because that same individual we're talking about has reformed a new partnership with a different model, and it's going very well. But I think some of the things that we did for him, I think is important to talk about.
Yeah, and we're continuing with Darin Myers, again, the facilitator of TAB and online, tab, CSRA.com. How did you approach helping really develop this partnership? And we're speaking of 3 different people within the medical space.
Sure. Well, I think, honestly, through some of my TAB constituents across the country, I came across a concept called the Partnership Charter, which at the end of the day is just a fancy word for saying, hey, really get into the details and talk about, before we look at all the glitz and glitter and what this partnership could bring. I think any house needs a strong foundation, and successful businesses, especially those that grow substantially, depend upon a very broad and deep and strong foundation. And so I pursued this individual of looking at a couple of documents and a couple of books that I thought worthy of reading, and then we went through a detailed exercise over several months with him and his partners to make sure we vetted out the details. I think often, partners will do this when they form their partnership. They talk a little bit about some of the issues at hand, but they don't go deep enough. And so what happens, I think, is there's a silver lining of ambiguity that ends up coming back to bite them. And I think what you really need to do is go through a exercise of vetting out things in great detail. And that's probably why a lot of people don't like doing it, is because it is detailed. But I think if you can do the upfront homework, it can save you costly issues day to day. I mean, people, partnerships that start to go sour. Obviously, you talk about litigation and shutting down the business and lost friendships, but I think prior to that, you're talking about years and years of potential avoidance and just day-to-day chaos and crisis that darn, if you would have done some upfront homework and gotten into the details, it would save you a lot of that. And then obviously the pending potential litigation, so on and so forth.
So what is the type of work that you charged the three folks with so that it has become a dream so far and not a nightmare?
Right. Well, first of all, let's talk, it's a chartership. Actually, a charter can be, it's a signed document. It's a living document. It's subjected to change. It's not a legal document per se, but it does have some potential binding legal authority in some cases where a mediator or arbitrator can use it. So it doesn't have that contractual like a contract would have, where it's intended not to be changed often. Charters should be changed often, but things like, you go through it. Just let's start with intrinsic things like your values, what it's not just about money and decision making and ownership, but it's also about values and what makes you tick. So it's things like, hey, what is your vision in life for this partnership? But it also gets into the money part of it, the decision making part of it. Who's going to make decisions? What's the voting percentage? Who's majority? Is it, so on and so forth.
Are partners given different responsibilities based upon their
roles and responsibilities
strengths?
Can be described? Obviously, things need to be discussed on, when is the group going to be put together to make a decision versus things that maybe can be unilaterally decided upon by one of the partnerships. Little things like, a 3-member partnership. That sounds
2 to 1.
That there is some things that just whether it's 50-50 with 2, but even there's differing dynamics when you get an odd number like a 3-person partnership. Just by default, there's a 2 versus 1 concept.
That's right.
And it's just fraught with issues. And it's a big if, it can be avoided and it can be planned accordingly, but you need to do the upfront homework and dig into the details.
Well, if you have interest in learning more about the TAB group, and these are the kinds of issues that come up in partnerships and such, it's a group of like-minded people who discuss confidentially what's going on in their very different industries. So there's a non-competition of unique industries. Darin's the facilitator, and the website is tabcsra.com. Darin, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're exactly. Just a final thought on these partnerships is, I would say this. If you go to the Barnes & Noble or Amazon and look for books, you can get every darn book known to mankind when it comes to business decisions. But I'll challenge the audience. Go out and try to look for books that really, really focus on partnerships. And I will tell you won't find many.
That's
you may
right.
find a few. And I know there's a few out there. I've used one in particular that I like. But, we're all specialists, whether it's in travel industry or manufacturing. We come to the partnership being specialists in a particular industry. But I really know of no one that's a specialist in partners and partnerships. And at the end of the day, if you go back and look at where businesses failed partnerships litter the street. And so I would just challenge the audience, anybody that's considering doing a partnership or is even currently in one and it seems to be working well. I don't think it's never late to go back and just look and make sure you're ready for the changing dynamics, whether it's external or internal to the company.
Amen. And Darin's also a thought leader. If you want to look at his weekly articles and podcasts, please go to augustabusinessdaily.com. And thanks to Get Up Productions for their help with the studio and the recording and the editing. And we invite you to look into what they're doing in the community should you be interested in some podcasts.